A lot of us will never forget where we were when we heard what happened or when we saw what happened on TV on that September morning. But what about the generation that never lived through it? We are well past the point where students have personal experience to draw from, and that's changed the way a lot of our schools and teachers approach this day. Kent spent the morning in a St. Paul classroom with a teacher who's seen that conversation evolve over the past 20 years. Hi, Kent.
Hi, Jana. Yeah, that teacher, Kari Reese, says on one hand, very little about her 9/11 lecture itself has changed over the years. She's still in the same classroom she was when the attacks happened, and she's always used a classroom perspective to tell the story of that day in a very personal way. But how her students respond to that lesson has shifted, and it's changed her outlook in the process.
Put yourself in the shoes of our students who were here on 9/11/2001.
For each of the past 21 school years, Highland Park history and geography teacher Kari Reese
Look on the board right there.
has recounted and retold
In 102 minutes, it all happened.
the same story of how 9/11 unfolded in this same classroom 22 years ago.
I turn on the television and we see the second plane going into the tower. Everybody knew at that moment we were being attacked.
And from that moment on, Reese says the day has always mixed horrific history with personal perspective.
I'm 60 today.
You see, for several years after the attack, her birthday didn't feel like a time for celebration, so she opted for reflection.
At that time in the early years, a way to process what had happened, to draw meaning from that terrible tragedy.
But now, more than 2 decades in, her lecture is giving meaning to a date these 10th graders never lived.
9/11/2001 happened 7 to 8 years before they were born. Nobody had a cell phone and nobody called their parent. They really need to hear it from someone who was here and what that day was like here in their space at their school. Can you kind of imagine the chaos of this time? What it must have been like?
I was just like picturing myself in that classroom, and I can't imagine not having, like, being able to text my mom.
Miss Reese mentioned after it happened, people were printing out posters of their loved ones, and just not being able to find somebody you loved it's very scary.
Texting was a legacy of 9/11 because the deaf and hard of hearing were easily able to transmit messages to each other during that horrible, horrific time.
I immigrated here with my mother from Ethiopia in 2016. So only around that time did I even start hearing about like terrorist attacks and 9/11 and all that.
And they are targeting what? Symbols of America.
It was definitely interesting to hear Miss Reese talk about the economic powers, political powers, and the attack of the symbols, because I thought it was just the Twin Towers.
That was interesting, how it was like a psychological attack almost. I'd never thought about that before.
And if you're wondering how long this lesson will linger, she'll leave you with a conversation she just had with former students this weekend.
They're like 28 years old now, so they're 10 years out of school. And then they said, oh, tomorrow's 9/11, it's your birthday. I'll never forget the 9/11 lecture. That's what keeps me motivated. It's my birthday present to the future.
And on her 60th birthday, Kari told me today that she knows she won't be teaching forever, but she says she would definitely be open to keep the 9/11 lecture going even after she retires. Jana, she just feels such a strong pull in relaying and reliving that history for those students.
Yeah, and the students seem to really be paying attention to watching her tell the story of that day that you and I, obviously old enough to live through. I was in the news business. Did you feel like the students were really taking it in?
They were absolutely taking it in, and she said that's the thing that strikes her most about this day, not just the story she hears from them after, but just the silence in the classroom and the engagement. I mean, those kids were wrapped with attention. And by the way, she does this lecture for about an hour and a half, 3 times a day on Today. That's a heck of a way to spend a birthday, but she feels strongly about it.